Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in Andeve. Putting wrestling into submission. Welcome to Wrestling Rebooked with Spoiler and Andeve, rewriting your favorite angles the way we want to believe. Putting wrestling into submission. Finally, that time has come. We used to rely on Meltzer, now we bang our own drum. Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in Andeve. Putting wrestling into submission. The Spot Monkey is here, shooting from the hip, back to break more, and ready to let rip. Spoiler is the host. Will his mic be ready to go? He loves a Mac Clinic, and we're ready to start the show. From Mania to Survivor Series, a wrestling podcast. Each match rebooked, fresh views are cast. Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in Andeve. Putting wrestling into submission. Our finger is on the pulse for all the latest news. What's going on with Vince? We don't really get his view. We love a docking view, old school to new. I think it's time to tap out. Hit the music. We're through. Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in Andeve. Putting wrestling into submission.
Episode 11. Wrestling Rebooked. Putting wrestling into submission. Hello and welcome. And we're back. Merry Christmas, everyone. Spoiler here for some more festive cheer off the back of another hot WWE pay-per-view. Joining us as ever, shooting from the hip, excited for Christmas, is a Spot Monkey. Andeve, how you doing?
Yeah, very well, mate. Solid 6.5 out of 10. Can't complain.
Dear. YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. Search the hashtag Wrestling Rebooked to get in touch. Keep up with latest ongoings, analysis, reviews. On today's episode, we will be looking at the Tables, Ladders, and Chairs PPV that's just gone down just this past week. Finger on the pulse, as always, with the latest backwards and forwards in AEW and all things ratings. Plus, we've had a little look at the Goldberg documentary on the network at the moment, WWE Untold, all coming up today. Also, just a quick mention that our next episode will be wrestling pre-booked before the Royal Rumble. So look forward to that one at the turn of the year. Right. So WWE TLC, the 20th of December, last PPV of the year. Were you excited for this, Spot Monkey?
I've got to say that I found it very difficult to keep up with Raw and SmackDown, not for any reason other than they just weren't worth keeping up with. So I've approached this pay-per-view with not too much in terms of the weekly shows in my back catalogue. So it was quite fresh in that sense, but it also meant some of the storylines didn't quite resonate as maybe the WWE wanted them to. Having said that, I enjoyed the pay-per-view. I liked it more than I disliked it, which is about as ringing endorsement as you can give any pay-per-view that WWE's put on in 2020. So
right.
Yeah, it was all right.
Yeah, so conversely, I have seen a lot of Raw and SmackDown over the past month, or in the build at least to this PPV, so that it might provide some sort of contrasting insights as we go through the matches. So opening us up was a title match. So, I mean, that's really getting off on the right foot with you, wasn't it? AJ Styles against Drew McIntyre, a TLC match, of course, 27 minutes and 5 seconds. So quite a lot to digest here, Andeve.
Yeah, there was a lot going on come the end of the match. I'm not so sure about the beginning of the match. You're absolutely right when you talk about you're opening a show with a TLC match. I mean, you're setting the bar very high for anyone that then has to follow. And you're also starting the show with a title match. So, I mean, you'd rather the title match was first rather than second.
The title.
Yeah, the main heavyweight title on Raw. So, I suppose open with a bang. I suppose the match was probably all right, but for me, I was just dipping in and out of it. I wasn't entirely sure why Styles was suddenly the number one contender and where he'd come from. I suppose he was captain of Team Raw at Survivor Series. Just strike me as a placeholder match before they get cruising around to the Rumble and the run up to Mania. The match itself sort of underplays it because they did so much in that match, and there was an awful lot of effort and attempts at making it really, really engaging. But it just felt a little bit like lots of it had been seen before. And I know I've seen other reviews saying that it was an A match or an A-star match, a 4 out of 5 match.
5-star?
No, I haven't seen his view actually, Mr. 7 stars. But for me, it was all right, but no more than that, really.
Yeah, look, I think I share your view with opening with the title match in a TLC. It's just talk about straight in at the deep end, and I think we'll later in the review we'll come to a couple of alternatives, as we are all about rebooking, as to how they could have opened this show. But anyway, as it was, AJ Styles' athleticism never to be underestimated. I actually think athlete-wise, he's one of the best in WWE, if not the wrestling business, full stop. The way he lands, the way he is so precise with his maneuvers, his ability to do some of those moves off the top rope is second to none. I'm not sure there's really anyone else that can do it with quite his execution. And the power bomb that Drew McIntyre dropped over the top rope, it was fantastic visual, despite what was about to come later in the show. So there were some good moves, but I think the overwhelming theme here, and this is coming from someone that has watched a fair amount of TV in the lead up, was just the immunity now to the impact of a chair shot, a ladder shot over the back, over being trodden on, incorporated into some sort of submission move. It's just been done over and over. It's just a tired gimmick. And now, if you sort of look at this from a non-wrestling fan's perspective, it's like, how is this not being sold more than it is? It just doesn't resonate.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose because who cares about non-wrestling fans? Just thinking about it from watching it ourselves and myself, it did start quite intensely, which suited McIntyre with his brawling, brash style. And obviously AJ Styles is an excellent seller. So that looked good to start with. And there were a few McIntyre slams that looked really powerful and strong. And then there was some work on the chair in the corner that looked good as well. But about halfway through, they really ran out of steam and they slowed the pace, which I suppose they had to. And partly, I think the reason they slowed the pace is because of what was going to happen in the Owens and Reigns match, which we'll talk about later. But I think you're right in terms of the moves. There was some set pieces that looked
free kicks, corners.
Yeah, no headers in the back of the net from them. But there were a few set pieces that looked all right, like when Styles was hitting the calf crusher and he did it on the ladder and then he did it on the chair and it looked quite good, but it was almost designed just for a set piece or a YouTube clip rather than as a sort of a section of the match moving on. It was almost like, I'm just going to do this, put it out there. There'll be a few gifs knocking around on the internet, but it doesn't really add anything to the match. And really, then my interest only really peaked. I was sort of looking, and I wasn't engaged in the match really because I was looking away because I've sort of seen this before. Oh yeah, they're on the ladder, they're going to fall off. Oh, there's a few tables at ringside. It only really peaked for me when the Miz decided he was going to cash in, but then that didn't really go very well. Not just because Miz wasn't successful, but just because of the way they then planned around that once he had cashed in.
The point about non-wrestling fans, just to cycle back for a moment, is that, and we're going to talk about this a bit later with the situation with the ratings, is that we know whether it's due to the pandemic or as a consequence of is feeding into it. But if the wrestling business generally is going to pick up and entice new people to watch and engage in the product, then this is exactly the sort of stuff that A, is either going to turn them on or B, very much turn them off. And if you're just throwing all of this mud at the wall and hope it sticks kind of attitude to booking the shows and increasing buy rates, then I just don't think it's going to work. But anyway, to your point about the Miz, yeah, from the point at which he entered this match, I thought it was just a car crash. an absolute car crash.
When he first got there, were you not a bit intrigued? I mean, when he first turned up and cashing it in, I was like, okay, this is going somewhere then. And I actually felt like he could win it.
The first thoughts of when he came in was like, oh my God, it's a shame there's no crowd here. It's part of that buzz of a cash in, whether it's teased or it's actual, is, the pop from the crowd. So that was the first thing. But he then went straight through a table and sort of bumped for about 10 minutes. And it's such a long time, especially after some of the other moves, which weren't sold to that extent. Some of the false finishes at the top of the ladder kind of teased Miz potentially going over, taking the title. But did you ever really think he was going to win?
I suppose as the match went in longer, when this is now a triple threat match, I mean, that's where parts of it don't make sense. I did wonder why Styles' bodyguard in a no disqualification match just stood and watched the entire match with no emotion on his face, not looking like he was going to get involved until Miz eventually turned up. And it was quite a nice moment or spot when the chair broke on his back. But actually, that doesn't put over any character because he hasn't really got any character at the moment. No. He's just the guy that guarded Raw Underground or was a ninja, and now he's just faceless. I think talked about this before, faceless, soulless bodyguard. So it was at least nice to see him then get involved in the match. And I did quite like there was almost too many false finishes with them climbing up the ladder, which made me think, oh, this is it. Oh, this is it. Oh, it's not. So that sort of works. But Miz and Morrison have presented themselves as a joke, have been presented as a joke for the last 3 to 5 months.
Yeah.
They were presented as a joke. Morrison turns up, runs away. Why would Miz cash in during the match? Why wouldn't he not cash in at the end of the match? I suppose ultimately Miz can probably handle not cashing in or losing the cash in, and it doesn't affect him too much. But it also shows, not just in this match, but how poorly made a decision it was to give it to Otis in the first place, take it off him for Miz, and now Miz sort of throwing it away. So I was a little bit more interested when he turned up. I just suppose that they didn't really end it properly with enough thought.
You just go back to Styles' bodyguard. Let's give him his name. Omis, isn't it?
I don't know.
Omis?
I don't even know.
His character, he's saying about him not having a character. His character is not having a character. Like in an era where everyone's doing the same scripted promos and doing the same moveset, and everyone's going through a table, including Lana 9 times. You've got a guy here who's on screen showing no emotion, doing no moves, but yet he's on TV every week. And that in itself is just a break from the norm and the monotony of some of the programming. So all of a sudden he's involved in the match. So that kind of shattered that illusion a little bit. But yeah, I think you've kind of ripped it to shreds enough. Rebooking?
Well, I say I'm a bit out of the loop because I was watching very little of the shows.
You are the loop
in the run up. So I guess if I'm rebooking it, I need a little bit more credibility for Styles as a challenger. I can't. You can't have the male Raw heavyweight title TLC match first on a show, and like you said, or a cash in as well. A cash in as well. A bodyguard, another tag team partner joining. It just it's a bit much.
Okay. Carmella against Sasha Banks for the Women's SmackDown Championship. 12 minutes, 10 seconds. I'll kick us off. Carmella hasn't really been active in ring on TV over the last few weeks, but has been heavy on the promos, which actually have been all right for this sort of revamped version of her. They're obviously giving her a second push. Described as never looking more stunning and beautiful by Corey Graves as she hit the ring. And actually, as far as mat wrestling goes between Sasha and Carmella for the women's side, I think this is probably as good as you're going to see. Some nice exchanges. It flowed well. We could tell they put some effort into putting that match together. First 5 or 6 minutes, first half of the match, they sort of foil for each other. You could see Sasha was leading it, calling it, and it worked well. And as it built sort of nicely down the stretch, you see Carmella's sort of frustration building in kind of the way that her character has now evolved. And she has a nice move as well, the code silencer, which I think is quite a good visual for the way she kind of wraps her her knee around the back of the head. And okay, it's fair enough to keep the title on Sasha as one might want to do. She's one of the biggest stars, and certainly in the female side of things. But I suppose my only rebooking angle here is, could they have gone all in on Carmella and just sort of gone against the grain slightly here for their recent, very predictable booking trends?
Nah, you can't put that title on Carmella, given everything that Banks and Bailey have been doing for the past few months and where Banks has got to. I thought the match was okay. I think Carmella definitely grew into the match. I thought to start with, you could really, and throughout the match, and actually from start to finish, but you could see it more at the finish. The difference between Banks's ability and Carmella's ability was really quite palpable. And it was really obvious when Banks was hitting those meteoras, which are just fantastic and look really good, and she delivers them really well, versus Carmella at one point had Banks in a submission in the middle of the ring with a knee in her back, and it just looked poor by comparison. But and then there was a phase where Banks was hitting her Eddie Guerrero homage, where she did some kicks, the Three Amigos and a frog splash, and at that point I thought the gap between the two of them was massive, but in terms of how they were performing in ring. But Carmella did raise her game in the sort of second section of the bout, where she hit the X Factor and then she tied Banks up on the rope, and then they had those nice sequences from the top rope followed by roll throughs and various pinning combinations. So yeah, come the end, I thought Carmella had done all right, but it was quite clear who the A plus player in that match was, and I think that's why really the result was the right one, and the only one they could really inevitably come to, which is the Banks success.
Yeah, Carmella, that is certainly one of those that can up her game when she's with someone better than her in the ring, but stick her in there with someone more rookie and you might have a problem.
Who is this person that Carmella has? Is it Reggie? Is that his name?
Reggie.
Where's
her assistant. Well, he stands there at the top of the stage during her promos and pours her champagne. Stands there with a tea towel over his forearm.
Right, because he didn't get involved too much apart from a couple of decent catches.
He's does well in the slips. Yeah, he's turned up on a few occasions, in sort of physical aspects. He was quite involved in SmackDown in the lead up.
Yeah, because it's an interesting play, because obviously you have women that do get involved in men's matches, and we've got no issue with the men being struck by the women. But obviously, once you've got a man at ringside in a women's match, it's still, maybe I just need to catch up with the times a little bit, but it still feels like there's something slightly imbalanced if he gets in and clocks the female wrestler. So yeah, and we haven't quite got to that stage yet. I suppose someone like Chyna or maybe Beth Phoenix or even Nia Jax, when Orton was hitting the RKOs in her, because of their size, it feels a little bit more legitimate. But I still think we're a little bit away from him being able to interfere in a women's match, someone being able to interfere in a women's match when they're of that size and stature. Yeah,
it's been happening in NXT a fair bit with a guy called Robert Stone as a manager over there, and he's fairly diminutive in size, and he's been getting clocked by, you name the female wrestler on that card, he's been getting clocked by her.
Yeah.
But anyway, digress. Okay, next up we had the Raw tag team titles. The Hurt Business, which was Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander, against the New Day, which these days is Kofi Kingston and what's his name?
Xavier Woods.
Thank you. Xavier Woods. 10 minutes exactly for this match. Now, what are your thoughts here, Andeve?
This is one of the two matches on the show that I really, really enjoyed. As I said, I've not been watching the show, so they even said in commentary, it feels like we've seen this a lot, different versions of one-on-ones, some sort of two, so quite clearly this had been bouncing around in the weeks running up to it, but I hadn't seen any of those interactions actually, and so when I watched it, I just thought it was absolutely fantastic from start to finish. I thought the New Day in particular, Kingston and Woods really, really delivered high intensity, high octane, fast pace start to the match that Kingston then carried on through the middle and towards the end section. I was trying to think, or trying to almost note down the moves as they were going, but they were so rapid. that I couldn't even sort of split the sections up. I was just watching quality move and athleticism after athleticism.
Do you know you can pause it?
Yeah, but I was in the moment.
Yeah.
I was enjoying my boys put on a show, which hasn't happened too often in 2020. So I just really enjoyed it. And I know obviously the criticism will be, oh, you just want to spot move after a spot move after a spot move, but it didn't really feel like that. It just felt like athletic gentlemen putting on a decent performance. I really enjoyed this match.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree too much. Some of the athleticism display from Kofi, he's absolutely phenomenal, isn't he? As well, you think how long he's been in around WWE, the business,
and how long it took him to catch fire. I know he was an Intercontinental champion a lot of times, but before he was in the New Day, he was just bouncing around the lower mid card. And since he's been with the New Day, obviously he's had the title run as well. He's been excellent.
Yeah. I think the only criticism here, and this isn't necessarily of any of the individuals in the match, is just that we've seen these guys go backwards and forwards for weeks on Raw in variations of this match, singles versions and added to sort of 6-man tags. And it's just when it got to this match, you know, when you've got the Thunderdome and you've got the same sort of colored ropes and the same setup every week, it just looks exactly the same as a visual. And obviously to some degree, they can't do much about that because we are where we are with a pandemic. But, you know, in times gone by, you turn up to a big arena for a big show and the set looks different. You've got a different crowd feel. And I felt this match just fell victim to that a little bit. Not taking away anything from the in-ring. I enjoy Cedric Alexander's lumbar check to finish as well. And my final point here, just to loop back to what we were saying about the first match, is this is exactly what should have gone on first as a window shopper for wrestling. And to see these guys open up a show, I think would have been superb, especially if there was a crowd there.
I think it does feel like a match that could have started a title change. I thought they handled the booking of the match well as well. So the New Day, the veteran team, clearly very strong. They delivered for the majority of the performance, and they had the little dissension at the end between Alexander and Shelton Benjamin with the tag in. So there's a little bit of storyline to come there. So it looks good. I wonder if they are slightly unsure what to do with the Hurt Business, because there was a time when Apollo Crews, all he did on Monday Night Raw was 6 weeks or 8 weeks, was all he did was fight members of the Hurt Business in different guises. Then they got involved a little bit in Raw Underground, but didn't really get involved in Raw Underground. What's happened to Raw Underground? And then they were involved with Retribution when Retribution are the heels and they're the face. But they're also heels, but now they're the faces in it. And now you're saying that they've been just going back and forth with the New Day. So I wonder if they're just, as a booking committee, not quite sure what to do with the Hurt Business, which is a travesty, really. I mean, I suppose they've got three titles on them now, and 4 if you include R-Truth, who turned up with them on Raw in the background. But I just wonder if they're not quite sure how to book them or what to do with them. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because on the one hand, they've actually created this product. They've actually created this group. And that I quite enjoy the black and gold and the look and the gimmick. I was MVP. As soon as he opens his mouth, you engage, don't you? Even Bobby Lashley. I mean, I'm interested in what he's got to do now. But yeah, you're right. Like, it does feel as if there is something missing. I'd say it would possibly change that as to bring up the Undisputed Era to the main roster. But maybe,
yeah. But just think about them, their treatment. If we consider them a tag team, their treatment versus the New Days, there's some disparity there. But anyway, I don't know. It was a good ending. I don't think Woods and Kingston are particularly hurt by losing the titles, and it does more for the Hurt Business in terms of having the titles on them. And it was at the end of a really compelling match, which I really, really enjoyed. So, you know, not much rebooking there for me.
Same as I've already mentioned. The rebooking here is having the show open. This match open the show.
Fair enough.
Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler against Asuka and a mystery guest for the women's tag titles. 10 minutes and 5 seconds So almost identical to the match previous, and a title change here as well. So Charlotte Flair comes out to a big pop from the crowd on her return.
Pipe through the speakers.
Yeah, you will cheer for her. No, it's good to have like a legitimate megastar, like one of the biggest in the company, regardless of sex, back for sure. Although interesting to see her sort of moonsaulting off the top rope, having not been in ring for months. But anyway, match itself.
Sorry, I was also going to say it's good to have her back. They didn't advertise it at all, did they?
No,
which is unusual because you would expect. I mean, Charlotte's the biggest female star. I mean, if she isn't, it's Ronda Rousey or Lynch, and they're not about. So she's the biggest female star. She's been away for a while. The WWE is always high on her, and yet she comes back unannounced. I actually fast forwarded too much. So I didn't even get to hear the music and go, "Oh, Charlotte's back." I just saw her in the ring doing her pose. But interesting that they didn't advertise it. They obviously felt they didn't need to for buy rates or for TLC, to raise interest, drum up interest in TLC. But interesting that she just walked back to the ring, and that's how she returns.
That would be an interesting one to ask Mr. Colicue.
Indeed, yeah.
Also interesting to see Ric Flair backstage in an enclosed environment with no mask.
I suppose he can't go down the ring, but as soon as you saw him backstage, okay, I think I know who's going to win these. I mean, you sort of knew anyway when she's back. They're not going to bring Charlotte back to lose.
Yeah.
As soon as he's backstage, you're like, okay, you might as well hand these titles over now.
Yeah. I don't have much more for this match. Like, it's interesting to see where they go now with Charlotte and Asuka. Whether that blossoms into a tag team, whether it sets up potential another rematch of at WrestleMania next year.
Yeah, it was clearly this match designed as a platform to reintroduce Charlotte and showcase Charlotte, which is a bit of a shame considering that Baszler and Asuka are also excellent and deserve to be showcased in their own rights. I didn't mention Jax there, but she's been doing all right, putting people through tables or one person through tables. I sort of feel like Charlotte and Baszler could have a future, but I assume Baszler's going to turn on Jax now. My only other thing about the match would be that it's just a bit frustrating to have the women's heavyweight championship there as a prop. So I can't remember did Asuka last defend it again?
Sasha Banks.
Was it Banks? And she lost, didn't she? Did Banks win that? I can't even remember. It's all merging into one, but that means that now she's got the title and the tag titles. And are we going to go into the traditional tag team champions that are eventually going to fall apart and turn on each other, which has just sort of really happened with Banks and Bayley? But I suppose it's good to have Charlotte back, and it's probably a way to address their declining ratings, which we might talk about later.
Baszler and Jax is sort of like, what's the point of having them turn on each other now they haven't got the titles? I don't think anyone cared when they did have the titles, let alone when they've not.
No. I suppose just to keep them busy, really. I mean, because the tag titles are on them in the first place, and actually you've got Billie Kay before the match trying to get involved with Asuka, saying, can I be your tag team partner? And they've broken up the decent tag team that would have held the belts and done something with it. So, I mean, I don't know what Baszler and Jax do now, because they're probably in line for a rematch at the Rumble, maybe. And then after that, they'd probably fight each other at Mania, I imagine.
Universal title was Roman Reigns against Kevin Owens. Reigns, of course, with Heyman ringside. TLC match, 24 minutes and 45 seconds of this Hellraiser. Indeed.
This is a second match that I really, really enjoyed. I thought it was excellent. It had that, even from the very start. I mean, this I had been keeping up to date with on SmackDown, because I think Kevin Owens is excellent. And for whatever reason, Roman Reigns' character turn now makes him interesting viewing when he was boring for years on end. Just right from the beginning, where Owens does his classic turn up in the ring and he starts fighting before the match, as even the bell's even been rung, was excellent. I just think they kept this level of intensity, whereas in the first TLC match it dropped off. They kept the level of intensity, which obviously matches their character as well, all the way through the match, and I really enjoyed everything about it, to be honest.
Yeah, every Reigns match now for me just feels box office. His character is quite engaging. Obviously, the Heyman factor adds The whole gimmick head of the table stuff just makes him quite compelling viewing, which if you compare to his character 3 or 4 years ago, then it's total opposite.
Yeah, it's weird though, isn't it? Because he is the same character, but
Yeah.
some small shift like this, and
It's worked.
it's really worked. And also, well done on Vince for finally agreeing with the fans. But fans were calling for this for ages and ages.
Yeah.
So we've had to endure so much boredom with him to eventually get to this, which is now really great. But there's no fans.
Yeah. And to be fair, quick to slag off booking and characters and stuff. This has actually worked really well.
Yeah, and was unexpected as well, right? We didn't think he was going to come back and be a heel.
Yeah. For me, like the match was, I agree with you. The intensity was there, and you could tell the guys were both like really trying, especially Owens. The build up in previous weeks on TV was pretty much more of the same. Last week on SmackDown, Kevin Owens was buried under a complete mound of tables, ladders, and chairs. You couldn't even see him. And so like this was just a continuation of that, and just loops back to my point of the top of the podcast here, saying about how sort of just immune to these chair shots we all are now. I just, recall watching a chair shot, in 1997, and everyone was just generally shocked, and it was sold as such. And now it's just like, what's the point? Jey Uso gets an ankle injury, and there's agents all over him, carrying him out. Tragedy, ankle injury. 2 minutes later, he's running back into the ring. I thought it just looked a bit silly. Ditto, Reigns selling chair shots when everyone beneath him, smaller than him, doesn't. So what's the point? But other than that, I don't want to be too kind of cynical on the theme. Some of the Reigns power bombs were absolutely brutal. He power bombed Kevin Owens through a ladder, twice described by Michael Cole as power bombing through a table.
Even when he saw the replay.
Yes.
Here's the replay. This is a joke.
The spear through the table as well, up by the turnbuckle, absolutely brutal. But the finish was quite nice, passing out or at the top of the ladder, kind of a little bit of a quirk and different on a ladder match, as basically is what it was. But just so repetitive and bland, and for what we've just seen over and over for weeks on end on TV.
No, I think I'm a polar opposite to that. I think that everything that happened was absolutely intense, intriguing, interesting, engaging. Wanted to see more. They hit hard. Never mind super strong style. That was super strong style. Like, the start with Owens with the cannonball and the frog splash. And then he's super kicking Uso. And okay, we see lots of super kicks, but just felt intense. I love the look of Reigns, that image of him with the steel steps on Owens. They had some work on the ladder in the ring, and then they were doing the bumps on the chair in the ring where they were putting moves on each other. And of course, they could sell that for, well, I'd probably have to sell it for 15 minutes or whatever, but you keep going. Owens was absolutely obliterating Reigns with that chair, hitting with a fisherman's suplex. And then I thought it was over for Owens, but then he was able to fight back. And this is the beauty of Owens, I think, is that you can sort of believe that he's got the intensity and stuff to do that. And it's interesting you said about that buried, because I didn't know that he'd been buried, but he then buried Uso underneath the announce table and some chairs in a nice, obviously then callback. He took some more punishment in the ring, smashed around the ladder. And then the tables that Owens went through, did he go through? He went through 2 or 3 tables, but then Reigns also tried to spear him outside. I just was in for everything that was happening there. And I hear what you're saying. Back in 1997, that chair shot would have been it. But I mean, you could go back to 1983 and look at Snooker coming off the cage, and that was the crowning moment there. But I mean, that's 30 odd years ago. So in 2020, this is the sort of entertainment I'm after, I reckon.
Mark.
Fine. Absolutely no problem. Like,
yeah, no, I get it. It's got to be amped up for the audience and for where we are. But I just think I'm sure he can come up with some different gimmick matches. This one is so tired and done so many times.
Yeah. So I think I'd concede there that, and it comes back to our point from last time out about gimmick pay-per-views. Once the gimmick pay-per-view is TLC, then they have to do a TLC rather than and they just push that drives the story rather than. In fact, I heard Jericho saying recently he would rather have an average match with a decent story than an average story in a decent match. And actually, what's happening here is that all the matches are being driven by the gimmick rather than the story. So I agree with you there. Probably, the TLC match needs to be woven into the story when appropriate, rather than just because it's December pay-per-view. But for a TLC match, I thought it was excellent.
Interesting coming from Jericho, considering what he's been up to recently. But question though, do you prefer Kevin Owens as a babyface?
I don't mind, really. I thought it would be really difficult to see a time ever where Zayn was a heel and Owens was a face.
Yeah.
They seem to be much, and Zayn hasn't even changed his music or anything. So it was really hard to see that happening, but they both do a great job. I can see Owens as the sort of angry, intense face looking to right the wrong. And actually, if Reigns is your top heel, then Owens feels like a legitimate threat that can stand up to him. And he seemed to have, I felt he had a chemistry that McIntyre didn't when they fought last time out. So I think he works as a face. He's obviously got, he's got the tools to do whatever he wants, really, Owens. If anything, he's underutilized because he's got the high fly maneuvers, he's got the heel tendencies, he's got the aggression, the ruthlessness. I just rate him. I think he's excellent.
What he hasn't got is the Vince height and look.
No. And his match at WrestleMania, Jericho was also talking about this. I've been listening to too much Jericho, but the match at WrestleMania, Vince said between Owens and Jericho was the worst match at WrestleMania he's ever seen. And Jericho said that that's just Vince putting you through boot camp, and that Owens will come out the other side. Presumably he has now come out the other side and be rated. But yeah, you're definitely right. He doesn't have everything about him: the look, his belly, his beard, his hair, his tattoo. It just doesn't quite fit, does it?
You look at the two champions, like McIntyre and Reigns, Orton, who's recently been in the title picture. I mean, they've all got a heck of a look.
Yeah, and Strowman, who had it before.
Strowman,
and then you're going back to Goldberg and Lesnar.
Yeah, so
he really doesn't, but he does. He is fantastic in his moves. The cannonball, the senton bomb he does, the pop up power bomb, the stunner. I just think I thought it was a really good fit between them, and maybe I haven't been overindulged in the matches or the run up in every week. I was just watching highlights, so maybe it felt a bit fresher to me than if someone had been watching it every week on SmackDown. But I think I never thought Owens was going to win, but he felt like a legitimate different direction to go in. And I thought the match, as I say, was excellent.
Yeah, I suppose the question becomes, should we be watching TV? Should we be watching the build? It's one for another day. Yeah,
it's hard to know. You need the build to be invested, but also you can't be invested without the build. So it's catch-22. Yeah.
Randy Orton versus the Fiend in a Firefly Inferno match.
Which had nothing to do with Firefly.
It's definitely not a laughing matter, Andeve. 12 minutes for this. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I did. I forgot it was on the card. So when Reigns and Owens was when they were stopping for breath, I was stopping for breath and thinking, well, hold on, what's coming on next? And I'd seen Zayn and Big E on the show earlier. And I thought, is that going to be the main event? But then this was the main event. Having seen it, it's obvious why it's the main event because of the imagery and the nature of the match. But really, it's just a match between two people without a title. So it shouldn't really be the main event. But did I enjoy it? Was your question? Yeah. It wasn't a cinematic match, and it wasn't a promo like the Cena Wyatt match. So that was a good starting point. The fighting outside the ring was pretty boring. Just hitting each other with foreign objects. To take your point, not selling, not really doing very much. The Flames just seem to have a life of their own, and just every so often spurt up a bit higher. Yeah. So if you thought about it too much, it's like, well, this is stupid, isn't it? But there were some great images when Wyatt first called the Flames, Orton jumping out the rocking chair, and I thought the end of the match was phenomenal. It's not often now you get that moment where you're like, flipping heck, what's happening there? But actually, Wyatt, when he was on fire both times, particularly the second time, but both times I was thinking, blimey, this is absolutely outrageous. So yeah, did I enjoy it? Yeah. Do I understand why it was happening, or what's going to happen to Wyatt now, or why Orton's fighting him, or why it was the main event, and why it's a Firefly Inferno match? Not really, but did I enjoy watching it? Yeah, it's right. It's quite good. I preferred it. I liked it more than I disliked it.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, it's an interesting point you touched on there about neither of them having a title, especially when we've just been talking about Asuka's title being a total prop in her match. That was my first note. Is that why is this the main event? It wasn't really billed as such, and on the TV. And Orton was in a full boiler suit.
Yeah. He never seen that before, but he did have on the back Legend Killer, didn't he?
He did.
I suppose Wyatt is the most recent Legend Killer or Star Changer.
Yeah. So I guess that made some.
Yeah, it's probably more because he was going to be set on fire.
Yeah. There was a funny comment from Byron Saxton on commentary. He said it, totally straight faced, deadpan. We all know the rules to this match. Light your opponent on fire to win.
Yeah.
But another gimmick match in a gimmick PPV.
But not the gimmick pay-per-view match.
Yeah, which was the main event. So that didn't really make any sense. The commentators disappeared. They were nowhere to be seen. And some of the TV screens the Thunderdome, can't help but say that in American accent, look like they're on fire at times. I'm not sure if that was deliberate or not. But
I wonder who actually saw that match, because there's obviously some heavy editing going at the end.
Yeah.
So I wonder if what's actually going on those screens and stuff, and which bits are shot when.
Right. So, I mean, joking aside, though, like, what does this really bring to the Wyatt gimmick? I don't think it really adds anything, regardless of the way the match pans out and the result. It's fine to have an element of fear about a particular superstar. You look at The Undertaker for his first 10 years. There's an element of fear about him, and he was sold as such. But like Orton was just going after him. No one's afraid of Wyatt. Like Rollins, we've seen in the past, just absolutely goes after him and lays him out. There's no element of surprise or fear to him.
No,
you're not second guessing what he's doing, at least in ring anyway. You might be a little bit surprised when you see a new puppet and a Firefly Funhouse, but so that didn't really add anything. And you think when you sort of take away the smoke and mirrors, no pun intended, there's nothing going on here. It was just a tame ending to this PPV.
Well, it's interesting you say what they're doing with Wyatt. Well, he's lost again. So he was this unstoppable force. They created a monster, literally, metaphorically, and in a literary sense. Sold a load of merch, made it look really good, created this really exquisite, unusual character with multiple faces that developed over time, chucked in Alexa Bliss, and you think they've got something to run with for a long time here, but he just keeps losing matches, getting the title and losing the title, and he's so lost credibility. So I don't know if I've actually seen some of Raw, so I know that he wasn't on it and that Alexa Bliss talked about him, but is this him finished now because he's been set on fire and so obviously beaten and destroyed? Also, if you're going to do that, what has it done to Orton's character? So has Orton now kicked on a level? He's already on the main event scene, so you've continued, I suppose you shouldn't be surprised, to bury the guy that is the most, or was the most talked about character, gimmick and wrestler on any of the shows, maybe bar Reigns, and then you haven't even sacrificed him to put Orton over. So while I did enjoy watching it, I liked it more than I disliked it because some good visuals and it was intriguing, it doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah. So you sort of enjoy it from a Mark's perspective, but don't enjoy it from a critical sort of podcasting analyst perspective.
Yeah. You're watching it and going, is this fun? Well, it was more fun than probably the Sasha Carmella match or the Asuka match to watch. But when I'm thinking about it, I mean, of course, it's the same as anything. If you think about it too much, hold on, you're talking about scripted people fighting in a ring surrounded by fire with no fans in attendance and virtual screens. One of them is a guy with multiple personalities, a weird mask and slightly overweight. The other one has been in it for ages and for the first time ever is wearing a boiler suit, a ring surrounded by fire. Of course, it doesn't make any sense, but when you sort of, take that away and suspend your disbelief, you're still disbelieving. So
Yeah, something's amiss, isn't it? Yeah. Another thing that jumped out was
Flames.
The agent's running out for Uso when he hurt his ankle, but yet when Wyatt was set on fire, he was just left to burn in the ring as far as the storyline goes. Closing thoughts on TLC? Maybe the year in general?
It was all right. It was all right. As I say, there was 2 matches I really enjoyed in the Raw Tag Title match and the Owens Reigns match. The lens of distance will probably say that Styles McIntyre was decent enough, and it's good to see Charlotte back. And I enjoyed Fiend Orton from a sort of left of centre perspective. So quite an enjoyable pay-per-view. Closing thoughts is probably that they're still running the same problems they've run all year. And it was interesting watching it, having not watched the shows in between the last one and this one. And I wonder what the ramifications of that are.
Absolutely, yeah. Do we need to watch TV? Not too dissimilar. My notes for the show were we've had 2 title changes, 3 gimmick matches, a Money in the Bank cash-in, and the return of one of their biggest stars, all in the same show. Now, I know we have kind of slated WWE before for not coming up with plenty of creative juices, but this, by any stretch, was a little bit over the top. As I've already mentioned, the use of foreign objects now has just got to a stage now where it's just almost pointless, or it's gone the other way. But my overriding thought really was this was a PPV that badly needed fans. Like, I think it would have made a massive difference to different matches in different ways. And apart from anything else, just to help kind of guide some of the creative. I mean, we've talked about, are wrestlers over? Are they not? Or how do you know? There's no fans. So you only got sort of social media to guide that. And I think that would have really helped this show if they were fans. You still awake over there?
No, mate. Yep, that sounds mostly like I agree with you and you agree with me. So we're holding hands here.
Should we move on?
Yeah, well.
Episode 11, Wrestling Rebooked. All right, as ever, we've got a finger on the pulse, and having exhausted WWE and everything they've got going on over the last few months, we thought we'd jump across to the other side of the channel, have a look at what AEW have been up to. We've had a couple of big-ish shows over the last few weeks, not least the introduction of, a change of title, Kenny Omega beating Jon Moxley on the 2nd of December, and their Winter is Coming, which is a Game of Thrones reference, right?
I guess so, although Game of Thrones finished 2 years ago, so what they're doing, maybe that's just the sign that AEW is 2 years behind WWE, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Nevertheless, the angle saw Omega win the title, assisted by TNA current executive Don Callis, who hit the ring, they escaped in a helicopter, and then appeared on TNA the next week with the AEW title. So, is this good for business?
Still calling it TNA and not Impact.
Impact.
Oh, it's same, but different. It's still TNT, isn't it? I think.
Yeah. So we thought we'd have the discussion. Is that good for business? Is that going to help them increase their ratings on their respective shows? Was it booked well? Is this some sort of angle that people want to see?
There's a lot of questions there. Let's see what I can remember. So in terms of that, it's not even a pay-per-view, is it? That Winter is Coming branding and that match. I thought it ended pretty poorly with a microphone shot. It sort of reminds us of the Goldberg cattle prod, but worse, which again we'll talk about in the next bit. Then they sort of ran off backstage and said, "Oh, by the way, what's going on here? Oh, well, we'll tell you on Impact on Tuesday night." And that's going, "No, what? AEW's on a Wednesday. We'll tell you an Impact on Tuesday." And it just sort of, I don't watch AEW weekly. I just see when there's some hype and then go and follow up on it. And so, they were going to be on Impact. And we watched it, and it was completely undersold and understated for what actually should be something. You say, is it something fans would be interested in? I think all fans would be really interested in a link up between AEW and Impact that sees the wrestlers crossing shows. that sees fresh matchups, and that actually then suddenly raises. NXT is already struggling on a Wednesday behind, I know it's the third show in theory, behind AEW Dynamite, but actually then when you chuck Impact into the mix and you've got AEW and Impact Wrestling together, then suddenly that's a much bigger promotion, especially when you think about their connections with New Japan, and it becomes something much more serious as a threat to WWE. And that's great for fans because it gives you good matches, but it also gives you a greater alternative to WWE. But the way they delivered it was just a bit like it didn't really matter anything to them. And actually, that's the way it sort of played out. When I was saying to you, because I think I'd seen it before you, I'll spoil you need to get on this at the end of this pay-per-view, or this Winter is Coming stuff. You're like, oh, okay, fine. But then since then, Omega's turned up a little bit, but there's not been too much, has there? Unless I've missed something.
Nope. Well, I mean, you have and you haven't. So just to correct myself, at the end of that show, which is effectively just a glorified house show, The Winter is Coming,
Right.
wasn't a PPV on a Sunday. Callis and Omega leave in a limousine. When they turn back up the next week, they arrive in a helicopter.
Oh, okay. So you
but
got
anyway,
limousine to a helicopter.
Yeah, just to be thorough. But yeah, I mean, you're right in what you're saying. Is in theory, it could be something which could really alter the landscape. If we really want to aim high here, in the way that some of these wrestling shows are booked. But actually, storyline wise, it actually makes no sense because Omega has turned up on Impact and then just turned up casually on AEW thereafter. Yeah. But storyline wise, they're selling it as a heist. So it doesn't really make any sense for him to just jump shows casually.
And it's only him, isn't it? No one else is really, Moxley and that aren't chasing him around Impact or whatever. Not that I want that. That sounds a bit like the 24/7 title, but
yeah.
There is a match set for January though. Omega is involved in. I'd say I'm following it very loosely, but Omega has got a match set on Impact in January against, it might be Swan or someone. There was sort of just now. I think he had a match tagging with one of the Good Brothers on Impact as well, but it seems very lackadaisical and lacking. Get ready for the pun, but it seems to lack impact.
I think that's potentially where you see the gap in quality between what WWE produce and these guys over at AEW. The quality of the production is generally much poorer. Storylines aren't as well thought through or even followed through. You'll see talent.
You asked about viewership as well, and I think I was reading that it hasn't even handled in that way because viewership was down the following week by 20%. So it had the peak, but what you want to do is be converting those casual fans, like you were talking about earlier, into regular watchers, but I haven't really done anything with it.
As you've mentioned it, figures are here. So that week or the week thereafter, Winter is Coming, AEW Dynamite, which is their weekly equivalent of Raw, 995,000. Another reason for that, which we'll get to in a sec. The following week, though, 806,000. So they, as you say, they totally tanked the ratings.
And is that what you're talking about there? AEW or Impact?
AEW.
Yeah. So I was thinking specifically about Impact. I think the week following Omega it was down 20%. So I guess there's a peak because he's there, but then people haven't stayed. So what are they doing here?
There's the other point. Is Omega actually that engaging? His promos definitely aren't in my book.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't really know. It's just fallen off a cliff. It's really just been booked. Something that should be huge, and actually something people talk about. Dream matches or rival fans or rival promotions, and you could really then add some sub layers. And some of the criticism of AEW and Impact is that maybe the depth of the roster struggles a little bit in comparison to WWE. Well, suddenly there you go, you can double the size of it, but actually they don't seem to have done too much. So I don't know. I think you asked a load of questions. Is it something wrestling fans would want? Yes. Is it potentially a really good move? Yes. Has it maintained viewership? No. And has it been enacted in a effective way? No. I'm a casual.
Yeah. So probably leads nicely on to the second aspect of AEW in recent weeks, and that's, of course, the return of Sting, which has got to be the main reason those ratings massively bumped. Sting returned 2nd of December on the Winter is Coming edition of their show. A week later, there's a massive 20% hike in their ratings. But the question, I mean, is as good as it is, from my sitting here as a wrestling mark to see Sting come out and have Tony Schiavone, Sting, that moment is like absolutely superb.
Yeah.
And of course we got Sting, sort of Crow Sting, full black and white gimmick, which was fine for the first week. But here we are 3 weeks on. I suppose the question is it good to see Sting back? What's he going to do? He signed a multi-year contract to be in AEW basically every week.
And what can he do? He's 61 years old now.
Yeah,
and he's been retired for the best part of half a decade. So it's 4 years since he's last wrestled a match because of injury. He's now at 61. I think in terms of the impetus he can give a show and the injection, of course, there's value there. But I thought AEW was supposed to be a different type of show, a different kind of show. And now what they're doing is just picking off WWE Hall of Famers. And, fair play to Sting and fair play to AEW. Fine, you got my interest, piqued my interest. Sting, if you're not getting what you want in WWE and they're offering you a 2-3 year contract for some money, and Jericho and JR have said that's the best money they've ever had or up there.
Yeah.
And good luck to him. But like you say, from a wrestling fan point of view, in terms of long-term storyline, what actually is it going to contribute?
Yeah.
Has he not got more to contribute? Maybe backstage at this point, the WCW, AEW, with lots of indie wrestlers or guys that haven't been in big promotions wrestling week in, week out. Maybe where his real talent will lie is backstage, helping with the booking and the storyline and passing on. But you don't want to see 61-year-old Sting in the ring doing stuff with Taz and MJF and all that, do you really? Oh, I don't know. I don't. Do you?
No. It just shows a massive void in the creative and the sort of booking knowledge in this show. He's been in 3 weeks. He's done nothing more than get in the ring, look at a few people, stare at a few people, swing a baseball bat. He didn't even really swing a baseball bat, did he? Sort of held it.
No, yeah.
And then left. Conversely,
go on.
Thanks. Conversely, it's interesting to see how Sting, even at 61 and sort of the megastar he is or was, is just massively elevating that show compared to any of their actual in-ring talent in their 20s, 30s and 40s that are able actually to go. It's this guy that's 61 that's bringing the product up. And I guess that's just kind of representative of where the industry is right now in terms of star power.
They're finding it difficult to create stars, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Like MJF, you would argue, I think one could argue is being created well, but otherwise you're relying on Jericho, Moxley, Omega, Young Bucks, Sting and Taz and Cody. Who have already established, or even people like Brody Lee.
He's gone. He's been gone for weeks.
Oh, right. Maybe something to do with Wyatt. Can help Wyatt come back. He's been burnt. It's back as Luke Harper. I don't know, but you're all relying on people like that lower down the card. So and Rusev, whatever he's called, Miro, but he's been handled. He came in on a fanfare and has sort of disappeared again, hasn't he?
They just don't really know how to book. I think that's the thing. And maybe Rusev had a lot of hands from WWE creative to create the character that he was first, like the heel army guy with Lana, and then Rusev Day.
In fact, it was he's on record as saying it came quite organically and he developed it, and then WWE were like, "Now we'll squash this."
Yeah. But he's not exactly getting himself over now in AEW.
No.
That's for sure. So it'd be interesting to see how Sting develops, but they surely can't just keep bringing him out and him do nothing and then disappear. He did one promo with Tony Schiavone where he hugged him and then left.
Maybe he's going to wrestle Arn Anderson.
Oh dear. It's just, what a cringe. Absolute cringe fest.
But it was good when he turned up.
Oh, of course.
And they kept it quiet as well, which is also something that rarely happens. And Edge talked about how, you know, how much effort they had to do to keep it quiet in his return at the Rumble, and they definitely kept that quiet. And it was the moment that actually captured most of the headlines the following day, even though it should have been, hold on, they're turning up on Impact. What? And surely that would be the way to do it, right? Why don't have Sting lead the charge on Impact? That would be superb.
Yeah.
But anyway,
no brainer, maybe.
We're rebooking.
But nevertheless, so 995, they nearly hit the million mark for their viewers, and which is a nice segue to Monday Night Raw, who on their show on the 14th of December dropped a record low of 1.53 million. That's according to Wrestling Observer Online. So potentially AEW closing the gap. I know we've talked about ratings before and their sort of debatable relevance, but it's interesting to see that gap starting to close. And it'll certainly be interesting in the new year to see if WWE tries to go in a different direction. Do they try to react to these plummeting views? Do they care? So
that's interesting, because originally people, when they were talking about the hookup between Impact and AEW, they were saying, well, it's just too small for Vince or WWE to care about. But then Triple H later came out and said, no, we're up for doing business where it's going to make money and bring in viewers. So I think they do. I think they do care. I think they're probably slightly. There's two things to say. One is that they're slightly distracted, or totally distracted, or deliberately distracted by what's going on in India and Saudi Arabia. And I'm not talking about the farmer strike in India, but in terms of trying to get their product over there and expanding that way. And actually, when you look at the money they've made the last 24 months, 2 years, it's a lot of it's coming from that foreign import. So I think WWE, in terms of its business model, is certainly thinking about that a lot more, and Google AdWords and things like that. And the second thing, in how does WWE respond, or do they care? I think, sadly, that we actually have seen them respond. And one of the ways they've done that is to bring back Charlotte Flair and put a title on her. And the other way is, I think in 2 weeks' time, or might be a week now, there's a WWE Legends show, just this classic WWE, bringing back a load of stars.
That was this week, wasn't it?
No, not this week. Next week, I think it must be. There weren't many legends kicking around this week. So yeah, like maybe that's how WWE, and that's just classic, going back to the same well to do the same stuff.
Oh, just took the words out of my mouth. Like it's not the way forward, though, is it? Like, it comes back to the same point about Sting. Like, keep bringing back Shawn Michaels, like, and even Triple H in gimmick.
Especially now when the biggest comparison I think it'll be most similar to is the Undertaker's farewell at Survivor Series. And given that there's no fans, given that it's a COVID era, so they can't even have any sort of contact or anything, it just, what you're going to have, just Nash and Hall just stood in a ring 2 meters away from each other, chucking up the click sign. It's no.
Hopefully, New Year, Rumble around the corner, Mania season kicking in, we might see a change of gears, as we historically have done. Be interested to see how things start to pan out as we get nearer Mania, and the inevitable sort of second Mania in a row without any fans.
Yeah, it's looking likely, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. Time for section 3. All right, final section, Wrestling Rebooked, episode 11, doc and review, as ever. This episode, we have taken time out to watch the Goldberg WWE Untold documentary, of course, on the network. It's only like 50 minutes long, but a really interesting insight into a topic that I suppose one thought had been covered to death. Everything that's is known could be known. But this was quite interesting. There's a few nuggets of information, certainly, that I didn't know in here. I don't know about you, Andeve.
But it's good to see it. And obviously, I don't know if you said what documentary you've seen, but the Goldberg, the streak, it's just, I don't think there's anything new, but I think the way it was put together was interesting and sort of condensed all the various things around it into a sort of coherent, nice 45 minutes.
Yeah. Maybe not new in terms of themes coming out, but new in terms of just a few nuggets of information. So it's it's quite nice the way they set the scene, talking about Goldberg's history in American football and his injuries in the early 90s, eventually falling out of that, training in the gym with Lex Luger, Buff Bagwell, and Sting.
What combo?
Yeah. And turns up in WCW 1995. And all of a sudden he's launched into the streak that defined him really in his career. Gets put over as having a sort of legitimate sports background. And I guess it was for that era and for his gimmick at that time, it kind of works. And there's one thing he says in that documentary, which links nicely to what we've talked about a lot recently and what we see in today's product, is that he took his job seriously.
Yeah.
And he took his gimmick seriously. And, it's not exactly The Undertaker living his gimmick throughout his career, but at least Goldberg in his time on top, he was that legit ass kicker that was going around spearing everyone when he was in front of magazines and appearing in TV shows.
Yeah, and thinking back to what we were talking about with AEW and the difficulty they're having creating stars, actually Goldberg is one of the few stars that WCW can say they legitimately created and made top tier talent. And they talk about it in the documentary that Hogan was running wild with the title in the NWO, and they needed somebody to become that challenger and be that next challenger. It happened much quicker, obviously, than they expected. And I don't just mean that in terms of cumulative time of Goldberg matches, but he obviously got up that ladder pretty quickly. And one of the things he talks about in the documentary is that he was learning the wrestling business while he was doing the wrestling business. And Bischoff had obviously realized what he'd got and strapped a rocket to him. But that actually he was not having any fun. He turned up, he did his job, and there's a photo of him just lying on a sofa, which obviously is cherry picked to match what he's talking about at the time in his monologue. But he says he turned up, he did his shows, he went out there, but he didn't really have many friends amongst the guys, and he didn't go out drinking or partying with them afterwards. He was there, did his job, took it seriously, wanted to be the best he could. And that was it for him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's certainly interesting that he says that he had no hand in creative or booking. He was literally turned up and told what to do.
Yeah. And he was okay with that, wasn't he? He was
he's totally fine with that.
I don't tell them what to do. They tell me what to do and I do it.
And of course, the flip side of that, and no WCW documentary, as effectively this is what it was, is complete without Kevin Nash's input. Of course, was the polar opposite when it comes to input and creative.
Although he'd tell you otherwise, or he does try and tell you otherwise.
Yeah, of course. So it's interesting, obviously, to get his perspective. He straight away was questioning and doubting, some of these numbers which were thrown out. What did Goldberg eventually lose on 174 matches?
173 and 0, wasn't he? So 174th match.
It's quite interesting to hear Nash talk about a lot of matches which probably didn't exist. He would have to have fought sort of 5 shows in 3 days to make the numbers stack up the way he was stacking them up. But it's interesting watching Goldberg on his streak. Look, a combination of sort of in-ring Roman Reigns with these sort of the power moves and the spearing, sort of the look of a Steve Austin, who of course was on the rise at the same time.
Yeah.
And of course, then he had this fantastic streak, different to the Undertaker streak, of course, but similarities there. And the way they put the documentary together leading up to the match with Hogan in Goldberg's hometown, the way the fans pop for Goldberg is just incredible. Just incredible.
Yeah.
And anything quite like it for a hometown.
Some of the stuff he did. So he did against better judgment. So when they were saying, "Don't shave your head," that's Austin. He's like, "Well, I don't care about Austin. I'll do what I want." And then alongside that, Bischoff's like, "Right, let's chuck in the guards and let's get the pyro." Like they obviously, there's an element of organicness to it, and I think that's one of the things I always. I shouldn't be, but I'm always surprised. And I'm then surprised I am surprised how actually you think this has all been carefully choreographed and crafted, and there's long term gone into it. But actually, like I said at the beginning, he was just lifting weights and people were taking the mick out of him in the gym. And then suddenly he's this main guy at Georgia Dome. I think conversely, that match gets criticised a little bit, Hogan Goldberg, despite the fact Goldberg won and it was in his hometown, but they just sort of threw it away with very little advertisement, not on pay-per-view or anything like that. They just it's going to happen in 3 days' time. And Goldberg says, I don't know how true this is, but I mean, it's his words. He found out 4 days in advance. They announced it 3 days in advance.
Yeah.
He turned up and he wrestled.
Yeah. It was on their TV show the Thursday before, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not Nitro, the other one.
Can't remember what it's called.
Yeah.
Thunder.
Yeah. But then it weaves nicely into his match with DDP. It's quite interesting to watch that match back as well, when DDP is clearly calling everything and was the architect of that match. Goldberg actually stepped up and pulled that match off like really, really well for someone that, as you say, was clearly green and was clearly just like learning the business. And that's match, if anyone hasn't seen it, Halloween Havoc 1998 is well worth dipping back into. Is one of Goldberg's better wrestling matches, especially when
it goes quite long, doesn't it?
Yeah, for a Goldberg match, definitely. Yeah, especially when you compare it to some of the matches that you had. I know it's obviously there's a big time gap, but with Lesnar, which are just crash bang wallop over in 5 minutes.
Or even when he tries to do different matches in WCW, he has one with William Regal that's probably his worst ever match until he wrestled The Undertaker a few years back. But yeah, so his match with Page is pretty decent.
Yeah.
Relatively speaking.
Yeah.
On that famous card in 98.
But the way Goldberg got himself over, it'd be interesting, you kind of draw comparisons with the modern product. It's difficult to see anyone getting over quite in the way he did. If nothing else, infrastructure is totally different now, of course, with the NXT developmental. And there's probably less guys falling out of NFL coming into WWE. So, it was a one-of-a-kind moment and a bit of a perfect storm in that sense, as you say, with Bischoff at the helm and clearly recognized he had something. So it's interesting, as always, to get the perspective of Goldberg himself as this documentary does.
And it's unusual that WWE is dedicating some time purely to a WCW product. And obviously, since 2003, Goldberg is associated with WWE and been in WWE, etc. But what they're talking about here is solely to do with WCW and the streak, and probably the thing alongside the NWO that was responsible for battering or taking the fight to WWE. Makes me worry a little bit that, especially as it's just dropped, that Goldberg is still relevant. And obviously, like you talked about before, WrestleMania is around the corner. We've got Reigns in the ring. He's a spear. We've got Goldberg. He's got the spear. It just makes me, and that was planned for last Mania, apparently. It just makes me worried a little bit about the possibilities there.
There's also talk of Reigns versus The Rock, wasn't there? But I guess
surely they'll wait till there's fans there, won't they?
Yeah.
Sure, if they're going to do that, surely.
Yeah. Yeah.
What did you think about, they talk about it, obviously you would have known it anyway. What do you think about the way they ultimately end the streak? Because that brings in the end of that 170 odd run, Nash, his intrigue.
I'm all for ending streaks. It's an event. It's a headline writer. It draws people in. It's a talking point. So no problem ending the streak. And this, I'm about to say, probably just summed up WCW, is that it really had no clue, no plan of what to do thereafter.
No.
There's so many different directions you could have taken him, his character, the whole company as a storyline. Didn't happen. No. And Goldberg himself talks about how he was, disappointed with the way it went down. I mean, fair enough. You can't be having someone tasered in the middle of the ring. Or then maybe you can. You've just had Wyatt set on fire. So I'm sure there could have been ways. But anyway, the whole thing was Scott Hall and the taser gun.
Cattle prod. Yeah.
Rubbish.
But there's also some controversy because Nash says he's not on the booking committee, but others are saying he was on the booking committee. And then his mates certainly seem to have been on the booking committee. I don't know if Nash is all about money, isn't he? Drawing heat, booking money. So.
Yeah, which is why it makes sense. You have the streak ended and you might as well have the guy who's got the most heat do it.
Yeah. And he's sort of run out of people to fight because he's ended up fighting Hogan multiple times, the Big Show, or the Giant, as he's called back then, multiple times. He's fought Bam Bigelow in consecutive matches. Like, you just got to the point where after that match with Paige at Halloween Havoc,
and Paige was at the top of that card at that point as well.
There's not a lot to do, is there? You can't go back to Hogan, so
yeah. So I've got no problem with it. It's fine, but just have a plan afterwards.
Yeah,
it's a bit of a shame, but he's still. I suppose the worry for you is that you see him in that documentary, he's still in decent shape, isn't he?
Yeah. And I think getting in shape wasn't ever a problem for him. When you look at him in his early WCW days, he looks absolutely jacked. But it's more the fact that he's got no. He's hitting the ring in Page says he hit Goldberg hit the ring in the ring post in 1998. He did that again with The Undertaker in 2018. So what's he going to do in 2021?
Yeah.
He must be out of breath walking to the ring these days.
There was also reference made to a spear that he tried to land as well, and he actually ended up almost spearing himself.
Yeah.
You see him.
His head hit the canvas before the person. Yeah. That's the same match, I think. He's at the ring post, then he spears himself.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. So,
but you can certainly see with the nature of him, with his intensity and how he viewed himself, plus the fact that he was not mixing with other stars, plus the fact that he was getting this streak, and lots of people were like, well, hold on, who's this guy getting the rub who's been around for 5 minutes, who can't actually wrestle, why should he go out there, get his check for a 2-minute, 3-minute match? You can see why he wasn't given, or some others might have strayed away from him and not given him the sort of click treatment on the positive of giving him a hug and showing him the direction of where he's got to go. Yeah.
But equally, and this is Goldberg's response, what is the point of wrestling? To draw. And did he draw? Did he put bums on seats?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And he still does, doesn't he? He still does.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
So, in some respects, who cares? And in actual fact, all of those politics that existed in WWE just shifted over to WCW with the Hall and Nash going over at that time. But anyway, definitely, and a good prelude to the Monday Night Wars documentaries that are on the network as well, like just a snapshot of the Goldberg stuff. So well worth checking out.
Yeah, and there's quite a few of them as well. Those that style, whatever it's called, the Goldbergs aren't doing there, the Untolds. There's quite a lot of them.
Yes.
So worth probably trying to dip into a few of them.
Yeah. All right. Wrestling Rebooked on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. We're back for the pre-booked Royal Rumble next year. Until next time.
Time to tap out.
Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in Andeve. Putting wrestling into submission. Welcome to Wrestling Rebooked with Spoiler and Andeve, rewriting your favorite angles the way we want to believe. Putting wrestling into submission. Finally, that time has come. We used to rely on Meltzer, now we bang our own drum. Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in Andeve, putting wrestling into submission. The Spot Monkey is here, shooting from the hip, back to break more, and ready to let rip. Spoiler is the host. Will his mic be ready to go? He loves a Mac Clinic, and we're ready to start the show. From Mania to Survivor Series, a wrestling podcast. Each match rebooked, fresh views are cast. Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in Andeve, putting wrestling into submission. Our finger is on the pulse for all the latest news. What's going on with Vince? We don't really get his views. We love a doc and review, old school to new. I think it's time to tap out. Hit the music. We're through. Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in Andeve, putting wrestling into submission.